Have you ever swatched out your ink pads or your cardstock colors and thought, this is great, but what about all the other supplies that I have tons of, like embossing powders or sprays? Well, this video is for you. Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel, and in today's video, I'm going to be sharing some really easy ways to pull together swatches of other supplies that you have a ton of, including things like embossing powders, stains, paints, and more, using the latest supplies from Waffle Flower. Let's jump right in and take a look at these new supplies and how they can work for you. So first up in this new release is the Supply Swatching Bundle. You can see the dies on the left-hand side cut out all of the shapes. There's a tube of paint, there's a spray bottle, and then the stamp set, the Supply Swatching stamp set, has several ways to stamp lines to write in the brand, color, type, and then there's different things that you can swatch, and there are different categories like powder, paint, all kinds of stuff. Now this is the Supply Swatching stencil, and they line up perfectly with the stamped images of the paint tube, the paint bottle, the embossing powder, all of that, so that you can swatch and stencil in the images. There's also an Inky Friends stamp set with lots of fun, crafty sentiments, and they also sent me the Small Prints stencil. I'm using a previous release, the Waffle Flower Nested Tags die, and the Waffle Flower Stencil Mat today to do all of my work on. So let's start by swatching out some liquid drops. There is this really cute little bottle. This could be for liquid drops. You can also swatch out alcohol inks with this. If you're swatching alcohol inks, I would definitely use an alcohol ink friendly ink. Right now, I'm just going to put some liquid drops on these. So I am just using a regular black ink. But if you use an alcohol-friendly black ink and you do it on, say, Yupo paper, you'll be able to do your alcohol inks as well. And maybe that's something I'll do in the future. The dies cut out all those little bottles so that you can then put them on a tag with some of the information. Here's the smallest tag in the nested dies, and I decided to use that as well as the liquid drop stamp. And then I also have a line for brand and a line for color. Nice thing about the mini MISTI is you can just pop those tags into place once you have the stamps exactly where you want them, and then just stamp them all one after the other because the stamps stay in the same exact place. Now I'm looking at my drops and I'm going to write down the brand name and then the color. I think that's all I need for drops, although with the Tonic drops, I do write Tonic, and then I write either it's vintage drop or jewel drop or whatever kind of drop it is. Now for the drops, you could just fill in the color and you could use the stencil for that. I decided I wanted to see the dimension that you can achieve, and I wanted to see the sizes you could achieve. So some drops are easier to make tiny little drops out of them or tiny little circle sizes. Some are a little bit harder to do that depending on the nozzle. So I wanted 3 different sizes, large, medium, and small, and to see the dimension. Once I have those down, I can adhere that little bottle down to the tag and then put the drops right on top. I have all the little die cut bottles to the left. I have my tags filled out, and I am just going to do those 3 different sizes of drops. Now you'll see some of them you have to do the swirl technique. Some of them you don't. Some of them dry a little flatter. Some of them dry a little more dimensional. That's why you swatch them out. So one of the main reasons that you swatch out your supplies is to get to know them better so that you can remember to use them and not just collect them, but also use them, but use them in a way that makes you happy so that you can see, okay, I really want something dimensional here for this card. So I'm not going to choose, say, this one that dries a little more flat. I'm going to choose this one that definitely dries more dimensional. Or I want a really tiny dot here. I'm going to avoid this one because I had too much trouble making a small dot, and I'm going to use this this one instead. So it really will help you incorporate your supplies more into your card making and have it less just sitting on a shelf. And I am guilty of that too. That's why I am a big believer of swatching, because it reminds me of the supplies that I have and gets me excited to use them again. Okay, so for this next swatch book, I am going to swatch out my distress paints. Now, those come not in a tube, but in a little bottle. So the Waffle Flower stamp set has both. They have a paint tube of paint, and then they have a bottle of paint. So we're going to do the little bottle of paint, and then I have the little paint stamp, and then I have brand and color. So this time, instead of die cutting them, I've just stamped the bottles right on the tag. And this time, I'm going to use my label maker because I wasn't so happy with my handwriting. I like to label out all of the colors and all of the brand names, and then use the Stencil Mat, which is non-stick. I peel off the entire backing of the entire long string of labels and then just cut as I go and put them down. This way I don't have to peel off all those little backings one by one. Once I have everything labeled, this time I am going to use the stencil. I'm going to place it down. It has an opening that is exactly the size of the paint bottle, and I'm just going to use a dot of the distress paint, and I'm going to line up that stencil. I'm just going to hold it in place because I'm not doing a lot of work here. I'm just coloring it in, just using a regular old paintbrush to paint in the color here. And this is going to give me an idea of the distress paints I have. Now, I love distress paints. I don't use them enough. So I am hoping that doing this is going to, again, remind me to use these supplies and also remind me what colors I have and maybe what I want to add to my stash if I see something in the distress paints that I haven't gotten yet. So this is a good way to see what you have, see what you need to add if you like certain colors that you haven't grabbed yet, but also remind you to incorporate these into your card making. So next time, maybe instead of just doing a plain white background, I'll pull out my paints. Okay, so I am just cleaning up in between each one, and you can see that it's really easy to do on that stencil mat. These paints are just wiping right off. Now, I'm not using a ton of them. Obviously, I'm not smearing it all over the mat, but everything is coming right off, and I'm able to just get these off the stencil as well while they're wet, because they do react with water while they're wet. Once they're dry, they're a little tougher to get off. So here is the rainbow that I have right now. You can see I am definitely missing a few colors. Here I'm going to swatch out my Distress Oxide sprays. So I have started to, now that they release one color at a time of the Distress line, each time a new color comes out, I get the Distress Oxide, I get the paint, I get the Distress Oxide spray, and I get the Distress Oxide refill. Those are the products that I tend to use the most, so those are the ones that I'm buying. But I haven't gone back and bought all the old colors, so I don't have the whole line of Distress Oxide sprays, so I really was curious as to what I had. I needed a slightly larger tag for this swatch book because the smaller tag wasn't going to fit the bottle and the information stamped out. Now, I didn't want to make a huge mess on my mat this time, so I just put down a little towel or a rag here, and I'm just going to mask off the very top of this, and then I'm going to spray right over the stencil so that it should just stay right in that label part of the bottle, and the cap should not get sprayed. And it worked this time. There are a couple of times that I used a little too much spray and I got a little bit all over the place, but for the most part, this really worked for me. So sometimes I had to do a couple of sprays, sometimes it was just one spray, but I really didn't want it to be fully opaque. I wanted you to get the look of the spray here. So this one was a little more opaque, but you can see on some of the other ones there on that fossilized amber, I got more of a spray look. And the reason that I wanted that is because that's how I use these. I don't tend to use them to create an opaque full color background. I tend to use them as spritzes or little bits of spray here and there. So sometimes it was full coverage there, but you could see how some of them did get that spray look. Once I had them done and I had all my labels, which was brand Tim Holtz, color, say spun sugar, and then type, I put Distress Oxide. So you know it's not just the Distress spray, it's the Distress Oxide spray. And then I'm just going to use some liquid glue on the back of those die cut bottles to adhere them down. So it's really nice to have the whole bundle because you can stamp directly on the tag. Or you can stamp and die cut when you're doing something like sprays that wouldn't really work stamping directly on the tag and then spraying. It would just get all over the place. And then the stencil really helps you just put color where you want it as well. So this bundle is just phenomenal for swatching out lots of different supplies. Now that we've done a ton of swatching, I thought it'd be really fun to combine this stamp set and stencils with their Inky Friends sentiment stamp set to make a colorful card. So I have a piece of cardstock cut down to 4 by 5 1/4, and the sentiment that I chose is just an Inky hello. And then I took from the Supply Swatching stamp set the 4 different of the bottles or containers that are in that stamp set. So I have the paint tube, the paint bottle, the spray stain, and then the little Nuvo drop bottle. And now I'm going to use the Small Prints stencil. I'm going to lay that down on the paint tube label, and then I'm going to lay the paint tube label stencil part over that. I'm going to hold those both in place with some Pixie tape. I'm going to use a Waffle Flower blending brush because this is such a small area. You don't need to use a huge blending tool here. Just a small brush will really do the trick, and some Kitsch Flamingo Distress Oxide ink. And so when you peel off both stencils, you get stripes just on the label, which I just think it's just the cutest little look. So this time I'm using the stars on the paint bottle, and then I'm going to put the paint bottle label stencil over that. So I have 2 stencils on top of each other, and then I'm going to color in with the Saltwater Taffy Distress Oxide ink. And that is going to put just a few cute stars on that little paint bottle. So peel off both the stencils there and check that out. Just a couple of little cute stars. Now we're going to do the stripes again, and I'm going to do the spray of stencil, and I'm just going to lay that on top of the stripes. I thought I was doing the stripes in the other direction, but I must have just accidentally picked the same direction. They have stripes in 2 different directions, so you can do that. And then for that little bottle of drops, I'm doing the dots. So I have the dots stencil placed down, and then the stencil for the supplies for the drops right on top of that, and that's just going to place a few dots right on that little bottle in different colors. Super, super cute, easy to do, to pull together, and just a fun, colorful, clean and simple card for a crafty friend. I would love to know what supply is on your list to be swatched out. Let me know in the comments below. If you want to see more about swatching, why don't you check out this video next? As always, I want to thank you so much for stopping by and spending time with me today. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you again soon. The mail truck just like raced down the block. That is not safe driving in a neighborhood, I'm sorry.